Usually at the start of every NFL season, I do a triggering every fan base video, and I didn't do one this year. I don't know why, but I didn't do it. I was a little bit lazy about it. But right now, I'm a little bit pissed with the lack of views that my videos have been getting. But I decided, you know what? I'm a little bit angry, and so why not use that anger and channel it into a good way? And that's by making a triggering fan bases video that I didn't do earlier this season. So I'm going to do that. The video begins right after this short break.
Before I begin, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, Game Time.
Game Time has built a ticket marketplace that makes it faster and easier to get into your favorite events at a moment's notice. Game Time provides the premier marketplace for last-minute tickets to the most popular events in sports, music, and theater in more than 60 cities across the US and Canada, eliminating the need for printing, and built a better way to access the best live experiences right from your phone. Game Time is focused on togetherness this holiday season, which means when you bring people together at live events, the experience is that much better, and it's the perfect gift. Another cool feature on Game Time is something called Game Time Picks, which filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets.
Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat before you buy it, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Game Time is also obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets.
One of my greatest experiences as a sports fan was going to watch an NBA game in person. The hype, the atmosphere, the tension, it builds up with every possession, and it comes across in a much different way than you might see on television. You might also see a celebrity or two courtside, who knows? That's the type of experience that Game Time is able to offer to you. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code BARRY for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code BARRY, BARRY, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time.
Arizona Cardinals. Arizona Cardinals, what do I even say about the Arizona Cardinals? You guys have been around since 1920. That was 1 year after World War I. Not World War II, World War I ended. And you still have 0 Super Bowls. You only have 1 Super Bowl appearance, which admittedly came in a great game, but that was your only chance and you blew it. Speaking of the current form you guys have had, I guess, a surprisingly decent year this year. But you know what? Kyler Murray is not the guy, and I think all you guys know this. He's not the guy. He's the type of quarterback that will do just well enough to tease you and keep you hanging on, and then before you know it, boom, you're 8-9 or you're 9-8, and you don't win anything. You're constantly in purgatory. You're constantly just floating. You're a stick in the mud. You don't mean anything. You're not relevant, okay? You're not relevant, and that's the worst thing to be. I'd rather be either terrible or I'd rather be in contention every year. The Cardinals, outside of 1 or 2 fluke years, have never been in contention. You're always going to be irrelevant. And by the way, your treasured, super amazing pick that was supposed to be the next Larry Fitzgerald, Marvin Harrison Jr., has been average at best, okay? Not terrible, but average at best. He's currently 5th in his own draft class in receiving yards. He's not as good as Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey, Brian Thomas, or even Malik Neighbors, okay? This guy was supposed to be the next Calvin Johnson. Now, I'm not saying that he won't be great, but so far, he's been a massive disappointment, and a lot of his stats have come in the first quarter of games. He's not clutch, just like Kyler Murray isn't after the month of October. So you guys are just going to continue to be irrelevant. And also, Larry Fitzgerald was a domestic abuser, allegedly. Atlanta Falcons. How do I say anything insulting? How do you insult a Falcons fan when you guys have probably the single worst loss in sports history, 28-3? I could just rant for 50 minutes on that, to be quite honest with you, because a lot of my personal anguish has come from that game, and I don't even root for the Falcons, okay? I just hated Tom Brady and the Patriots that much, but you guys, you're responsible for 28-3. Your career winning percentage as a franchise isn't even 44%. You just signed Kirk Cousins to a massive contract, and you just benched him for Michael Penix, who, go ahead and look up his college performances, he had more injuries in college than Anthony Davis does with the Lakers and Kawhi Leonard does with the Clippers, okay? And he's supposed to be the savior of your franchise? Are you fucking kidding me? And I know Kirk Cousins wasn't playing well, but there's no way that Michael Penix is going to be the answer. And your franchise still idolizes a dude who killed dogs and couldn't even throw for 3,000 yards in any season. Yes, Michael Vick, forget about the dog killing for a second, which by the way is a pretty big deal. Michael Vick never threw for 3,000 yards in any season with the Falcons. I'm not talking about 4,000 yards, okay? 3,000! He couldn't even do that. That's how shitty of a passer he was. And yet you got dipshit Falcons fans who still wear his jersey everywhere. And I know it's about influence and blah, 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 blah. And a lot of people compare him to Allen Iverson. At least Allen Iverson's stats, even though they were inefficient, at least his counting stats were amazing and were really, really high. Michael Vick was out here throwing 15 touchdown passes, 12 interceptions, and 2,500 yards a year. This guy was a fucking terrible quarterback in Atlanta, and yet your team still idolizes him. Matt Ryan was a choker. I like Matt Ryan, but he was a choker. It is what it is. He was choking with the Falcons. He choked away the Super Bowl. He choked away some NFC Championship games. He choked away a 3-point lead when he was with the Colts. The guy just didn't know how to finish games. Very good quarterback, not a Hall of Famer. The last time any killer instinct was shown in the state of Atlanta was when Ray Lewis was there for the Super Bowl in 2000. Baltimore Ravens. Oh, and speaking of Ray Lewis, the Ravens still have a statue of him, a guy who admitted to obstruction of justice so he could get off of a double murder charge back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then he went on to win a Super Bowl, and then for the rest of his career, just used God as a crutch to just spew a bunch of bullshit. The guy is one of the biggest phonies. Sure, whatever. He was a great linebacker. Who cares? He's one of the biggest fucking phonies, and your franchise idolizes him, and that's what you get. You deserve to fucking suffer in the playoffs every year, just like you have with Lamar Jackson, because you honor Ray Lewis. That's fucking disgusting. And you would have honored Ray Rice too if that elevator video hadn't come out. I remember, okay, people were welcoming Ray Rice back with open arms after he beat the shit out of his wife. And then the elevator video came out from TMZ, of course, and then people acted offended, and then Ray Rice got released and never played the NFL again. But by the way, let's talk about Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, whatever. We all know he can beat up shitty teams in the regular season. We all know his regular season numbers are great or whatever, and he puts up huge numbers in the regular season. This guy is the biggest choker in the history of the NFL. The biggest choker in the history of the NFL, and I say that as a guy who actually, I like Lamar. I like Lamar. He seems like a funny guy. He doesn't seem like a bad guy at all, but the guy, when you look at statistically how far he falls off, and people make excuses for him, oh, he doesn't have enough receivers. He doesn't have the right play caller. Blah, 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 fucking blah. Every year it's another excuse. If you're that good, get the job done, show up. It's one thing to lose and put up great numbers, okay? It's one thing to lose, or it's one thing to get beat. It's another thing to choke. It's another thing to perform at an exceptional level all season long, and then once the playoffs come around, completely fall flat on your face time and time again. And that's what Lamar has done more than any other quarterback that I can think of that actually mattered. This is a guy with 2 MVPs. He might win a 3rd MVP. That's first ballot Hall of Fame. That's like inner circle Hall of Fame. And so we're not talking about like Andy Dalton shit. Yeah, Andy Dalton was a terrible playoff quarterback. Drew Bledsoe, Cordell Stewart was a terrible playoff quarterback. Okay, Jim Kelly even was a bad playoff quarterback if you look at the stats. But those guys didn't have any MVPs. Okay, those guys didn't have 2 MVPs. Those guys weren't like, oh, we might get a 3rd MVP before turning 28 like Lamar is. Lamar is the biggest choker in the history of the NFL at this point. He could turn it around, but he's kind of like Joel Embiid, where you just know that when the moment is there to be met, this guy is not going to come through. And Ravens fans, they can continue to blame everybody from Santa Claus to the mascot, but at the end of the day, it's on Lamar Jackson to get it done, and he just has not gotten it done. Buffalo Bills. Speaking of another quarterback who hasn't gotten the job done in the postseason, yes, I went there. It's Josh Allen. Josh Allen's claim to fame is being cucked by Patrick Mahomes, who's a better quarterback than him, in 2021. And that seems to be the lasting legacy for Josh Allen. Oh, he played really, really well in 2021, and he got screwed in the 13 seconds game. Okay. So let's say he did play great in the 2021 playoffs, okay? He's a great player. He's become a great player, especially after sucking for his first couple seasons since 2020. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame someday. I get all that. He might win MVP this year. Sure, that's great. Okay, let's talk about playoff Josh Allen. Playoff Josh Allen outside of 2021. 2019, he goes one and done versus Groper Cleveland and the Houston Texans. In 2020, he wins a game scoring 10 points versus Lamar Jackson, who's an even bigger choker than he is, before getting his ass kicked again in the AFC Championship game where he didn't play that well. 2021 was the year where he balled out in the playoffs and his defense let him down. 2022, he beats Skylar Thompson at home, barely, and then he gets the shit kicked out of him by the Bengals at home while putting up mediocre numbers. Then in 2023, last year, he beats Mason Rudolph in the wild card round before losing again to Patrick Mahomes at home with multiple chances. And I understand, oh, well, he had some passes dropped. Well, guess what? He also benefited from the Chiefs fumbling on like the 1 yard line. So luck goes both ways in this case. So if you take Josh Allen's numbers, if you take his playoff numbers, you remove 2021, his playoff numbers are really not that good. But because his playoff numbers, you throw in 2021, they juice up his playoff numbers, and this pisses off a lot of people. But simply put, Josh Allen outside of 2021 really hasn't been that great in the playoffs, and his wins really haven't been that impressive. Even in 2021, the one game that he won was against rookie Mac Jones, okay? I mean, really think about it. His last 3 playoff wins are rookie Mac Jones, Skylar Thompson, and Mason Rudolph. And I'm supposed to be fawning over this guy? A guy who's made 1 conference championship game, a guy who's made 0 Super Bowls. You guys are perennial chokers. You guys are like if playoff Lamar Jackson multiplied into 53 people and created a franchise. That's what you are. You're Patrick Mahomes' bitch. Carolina Panthers. Oh, Carolina, what do I say about Carolina? Everybody knows you suck. Everybody hates your owner, David Tepper. Everybody kind of knows that Bryce Young sucks now. They were holding out, yet a lot of holdouts saying, you're just a hater. Bryce Young is going to show you, and then blah, blah, blah. It's pretty evident that Bryce Young sucks, and they missed on that draft pick. So what do I say to trigger Panthers fans? Well, I guess I got to go to the past. And the easy thing would be to say, well, I guess Cam Newton sucked or Cam Newton was overrated. And, well, yeah, basically, yes, Cam Newton was overrated. He didn't suck, but he was overrated as fuck, and he's the best player in franchise history. But I feel like a lot of Panthers fans already, again, they expect that because Cam Newton's by far the most famous player in franchise history if you're just talking on the field stuff. If you're including like murder and hired murder off the field, you got Ray Caruth as well, who's also pretty famous, an ex-Panther there. But I'm trying to think of other great players. You guys just don't have that many great players. You guys, there's not a lot of, you got Steve Smith, who was great, but never won anything. You got Julius Peppers, who might be one of the few players that was very good to great, but also a massive underachiever. Julius Peppers was what, like 6'7" and an athletic freak, and he accumulated a bunch of stats. But Julius Peppers should have been as good as Lawrence Taylor. I'm talking the physical traits this guy had. He should have been Lawrence Taylor, Reggie White level, and he wasn't. I know it sounds crazy to say about a Hall of Famer, but Julius Peppers, you look at it, he never had that one dominant season, never had that 20 sack or multiple 20 sack seasons. He should have been a perennial 15 plus sack guy, and he wasn't, even though, again, very good to great player, but he was an underachiever despite his greatness. He should have been even better than he was. So even for you Panthers, even your best players in franchise history are either overrated or they're underachievers, and you guys have had 2 chances to be relevant. 2 chances, 03 and 2015, and you fucked up both of those chances. You fucked up both of those chances. You had the tie game in the Super Bowl, in Super Bowl 38, and you kicked the ball out of bounds, and you never got the ball back, thanks to John Casey. But really, Super Bowl 50, and I may have said this before last year, but people think, oh, Super Bowl 50, they think back to that Broncos defense, they think back to Cam Newton getting his ass kicked in that game. Also, Cam Newton not falling on the fumble. You know what? I understand Cam not falling on that more than more people think, okay? But at the same time, you know what I don't think Cam Newton gets enough shit for? The Panthers, you guys had 2 chances. This was not a blowout. You guys had 2 chances, 2 drives, down 6 in the 4th quarter to win the Super Bowl, and you did shit. You did nothing. So instead of being a team with 1 or 2 Super Bowl trophies on your ledger, you got nothing. So what do you have to fall back on? A couple division championships that nobody remembers? The only thing that people remember the Carolina Panthers for is failing on the biggest stage. And that's the only thing they'll ever remember you for. Chicago Bears. Listen to me, the Chicago Bears, this team, the Chicago Bears, considering all the elite defenses you guys have had, should have at least like 5 or 6 Super Bowls. And you have 1 Super Bowl. Everybody always talks about the 85 Bears. Even nowadays, you know why the 85 Bears are so relevant nowadays? It's because no other Bears team since has done anything. In fact, the only other Bears team that ever really gets talked about is the 06 team. And that's because they had Rex Grossman as their quarterback. So they're used basically as a joke. Can you believe that team made the Super Bowl with Rex Grossman at quarterback? Wow. Here's the true facts, okay? I don't know if Caleb Williams is going to be good or not. I thought he was going to be good, which is actually on me because I should have remembered that no quarterback that goes to Chicago ever turns out playing well because quarterbacks, just for whatever reason, it's illegal to play well in Chicago. But you Bears fans, you already know this. You're already used to this, so I'm not really triggering you when I say that. So what do Bears fans hold near and dear to their heart? They hold the 85 Super Bowl near and dear to your heart, which I can understand. But guess what? That was a team that should have been a dynasty in the mid-80s, and you weren't. You guys were underachievers, and that's why you guys are basically the football version of the 08 Celtics. So much talent, 1 ring, and yet when people talk about this team, they talk about them like they own the entire decade and we're stacking up rings. Give me a fucking break. The most beloved Bear of all is Walter Payton. And Walter Payton was a great running back, obviously, one of the best running backs ever, but he had a lot of down years, and he was also not as reliable. They have a fucking award named after him, the Walter Payton Man of the Year Award. Have you ever actually read about Walter Payton off the field? Walter Payton was far from perfect off the field, so he shouldn't even have that award named after him. And you think about other famous Bears like Dick Butkus and Gale Sayers. Gale Sayers had 4 fucking good years, and he's in the Hall of Fame. Why? Because all these old-time sports writers get a fucking boner talking about, oh, if you ever watched Gale Sayers run the ball, he was amazing. Guess what? I don't fucking care. If he's in the Hall of Fame, Priest Holmes should be in the Hall of Fame. Gale Sayers didn't win shit. Priest Holmes didn't win shit. Actually, Priest Holmes did win shit. Priest Holmes won a fucking Super Bowl. And he had the same peak years as Gale Sayers, and he's not in the Hall of Fame. Why not? And same thing with Dick Butkus. Dick Butkus may have been a great player, but he was a great player for like 6 years. They had no longevity to him, and they're talked about like they're some of the greatest players ever. Where nowadays, I mean, think about a guy for instance in recent history. Let's think about linebackers. Like think about Darius Leonard, Shaquille Leonard. If he had played in the 60s or 70s for the Bears, he'd be talked about like Ray Lewis the same way that Dick Butkus is. Okay, even though Darius Leonard had what, like 4 good years before he completely flamed out for whatever reason. It's one of the most mysterious flameouts. Dick Butkus didn't have much longer of a successful career than that. So Dick Butkus gets overrated. Gale Sayers gets overrated. Walter Payton gets overrated as a man. The 85 Bears get overrated. Everything that's even good about your franchise gets fucking overrated. After all that, I'm still not sure if I actually triggered Bears fans, because a lot of Bears fans live in Chicago. And if you live in Chicago, folks, you're used to avoiding shots. Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals are a team, you know, it doesn't feel like it, but the Bengals have made 3 Super Bowls. It's crazy. The Bengals are like, they've been one of the most laughable franchises, at least they usually are, and yet they've made 3 Super Bowls. They haven't won any of them, but they all came ridiculously close to winning all 3 that they played in. So this is a franchise, I mean, they're so close to being the Northwest version of the New York Giants, where there's just a bunch of shit mixed in with a couple random ass Super Bowls, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, a lot of people listening to this weren't even old enough to remember the 2 Super Bowl losses to Joe Montana and the 49ers in the 80s, so I'm just going to stick with really the recent Bengals, which is that Joe Burrow's overrated, and I've been banging this drum a lot. Just like Joe Burrow's been banging his side chick, that he got caught banging his side chick because his house got broken into, which, by the way, now that we know nobody got hurt, is one of the most hilarious ways to get exposed. The guy's engaged, and he has his side chick hanging at his mansion, and his mansion gets broken into. His side chick calls her mom, "Mommy, somebody broke in!" And then boom, it's plastered all over the news, and Joe Burrow is at a press conference acting like, you know, he just got shot because he got exposed for cheating on his fiance. Like, dude, that's on you. You know, maybe that's karma for you guys being, what, 5-8 or 5-9 despite Burrow having great stats this year. Look, the fact is, Joe Burrow, I can't ever remember a guy having such a clutch reputation when he's never even thrown a fucking 4th quarter touchdown pass. He's played 7 playoff games. The Cincinnati Bengals have as many offensive touchdowns in the 4th quarter as they do defensive touchdowns in the 4th quarter of Joe Burrow's 7 playoff games. This is a guy, the Bengals really should have like at least 2 Super Bowls since they got Joe Burrow. They should at least have one. They should have at least won in 2021. They had literally, you go back and I mean, I've shown this, I've talked about this multiple times because Burrow seems to get a pass for it because people think he's cute or they think he has swagger because he wears sunglasses and mink coats or whatever and some other bullshit like that. Okay. But Joe Burrow has fucked up in the clutch so many times, even this year. Like I think about his fumble against Kansas City in the 4th quarter, the fumble 6 against Kansas City early in the season. But he's had so many opportunities to live up to the clutch reputation that he has, undeservedly so, and he just hasn't done it. But you see, Burrow is Bengals fans' only hope. See, I could sit here and I could say, oh wow, Mike Brown sucks because he's not paying Jamar Chase. And you guys are going to sit there and agree. Oh yeah. Okay. But guess what? When I go after Joe Burrow, it stings because Joe Burrow is your lifeline. He's the only hope that you Bengals fans have being relevant in the future. And by the way, Joe Burrow's almost 30. Can we stop fucking calling him a young quarterback? One of the future superstars of the NFL. The guy's fucking, what? He was born in 1996. It's almost 2025, okay? The guy's like 29. The guy's older than Sam Darnold already. I mean, for crying out loud, can we at least like stop calling? He's had two major injuries, okay? So he has been injury prone. He still doesn't have a signature clutch playoff performance when you really dig deep. And he hasn't even been in the playoffs, and he won't be in the playoffs again this year. So he hasn't even been in the playoffs for a couple years now, but he still is considered one of the elite quarterbacks in the league, which granted, he is a good quarterback. There's no question about that. But you know, the whole media circus and the way Bengals fans talk about him. Oh, woe is me. Poor Joe Burrow. Wow, 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 wow. Because, you know, it's like, yes, he may have had some bad luck this season, but this is just karma for all the insane amounts of good luck that he's had in order to get to 2 AFC championships and a Super Bowl that he didn't deserve to get to. And yes, Skyline Chili still sucks. Cleveland Browns. I honestly don't even know what to say about the Cleveland Browns because every person, like not every person, but pretty much every single person listening to this has zero recollection of the last time the Browns were consistently good. Every single person listening to this probably only knows the Browns from the Deshaun Watson trade, which everybody already knows stinks. And there's so much revisionist history about Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield, first overall pick, had some good years, but he was a disappointment in Cleveland. And then we all know about the struggles they had for so many years with so many different quarterbacks. So a lot of the Cleveland Brown fans that are listening to this have only known that the Cleveland Browns suck. So what do I even say about that to you guys? And that in and of itself, I used to say this about Houston, but at least Houston, like the Houston Texans, at least Houston has the excuse of, well, we were an expansion team. And you'll say, but Barry, the Browns were an expansion team in 99 too. No, the Browns had tons of history before that. The Browns had all the Jim Brown years, and you had the Bernie Kosar years in late 80s, and then you guys got cucked by John Elway 3 times in the late 80s with a chance to go to the Super Bowl. But that's already been overplayed. So I admit, I honestly have no idea what to say to trigger Browns, other than Deshaun Watson might be back next year. I mean, I don't really know. I don't know what to say. And in a way, that in and of itself should trigger you because you're fucking irrelevant. You don't mean anything. Most Brown fans have never even felt what it's like to be in the middle of a heated competition in the postseason. Okay, you guys made the divisional round a couple years ago versus the Chiefs. That's the closest you guys came to actually, being relevant in the postseason. And then you guys missed the playoffs the next year. And then you missed the playoffs the year after that. And then you made it last year with Joe Flacco, and then you guys got blown out. So a lot of you Browns fans listening to this have no idea what success feels like. You have no idea what success feels like. And you know it, but that still sucks. That's still an embarrassment. You should be embarrassed. You really should be fucking embarrassed with yourselves that you're a Browns fan. That you pay money to that franchise, you should be embarrassed with yourself. The fact that you still root for them. That to me, that's the best I can come up with. The fact that I can't even come up with anything to trigger you because your team is so shit is triggering enough. Dallas Cowboys. Oh yes, the Dallas Cowboys. I already trigger Dallas Cowboys fans year round basically, and we all know, what do I say? The jokes have been said many times. You haven't been to, the whole conference championship game jokes since 95. Dak Prescott's a choker. Tony Romo was a choker. Jerry Jones is the devil reincarnate. All the stuff, it's already been said ad nauseum. The Cowboys, they get 7 or 8 primetime games a year, even though they don't deserve it. They're the most overrated franchise in sports. I can say that over and over again. That's not really challenging because Cowboys fans expect that. So I'm going to do something challenging. I'm going to critique the early to mid 90s Cowboys. And one of the biggest things, of course, it's hard to critique and criticize a team that won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. But I'm going to try and do it because that's one of the few things that Cowboys fans that are still alive today. A lot of you guys weren't alive in the 70s when Roger Staubach was there. Or at least a lot of Cowboys fans that were around back then have died because it was so long ago. So a lot of Cowboys fans, at least over the age of 40, the only championships they remember are the ones from the early 90s. I hear so often that, oh boy, if Jerry Jones didn't force Jimmy Johnson out, that the Cowboys of the 90s would have won 6 or 7 Super Bowls. No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't have. You know why? Because if you ever took a look at Jimmy Johnson's coaching history, the guy only stayed at the same place for like 4 to 5 years at a time before he would get burnt out and he'd go away. So you guys won it in 92 and 93, okay? Which, by the way, if there is such a thing as free agency back in the early 90s, you guys probably wouldn't have won in 92 and 93 anyway. But anyway, so because of free agency with the 49ers signing Deion Sanders, you guys lost in 94. You came back with Barry Switzer, you won in 95. And that's when people say, oh, if Jimmy Johnson had been there, the Cowboys would have won it and, blah, blah, blah. No, you wouldn't have. The Cowboys would not have beaten. You had the Packers, who made the next 2 Super Bowls, won a Super Bowl, and then you had the Broncos coming up. You had the greatest show on turf. The Cowboys' run in the mid-90s ended when it should have ended. You guys maybe could have squeaked out an extra Super Bowl appearance, but 3 Super Bowls in 4 years was the max that you guys were going to do, okay? You're basically just a little bit better than the Redskins were from 82 to 91, which doesn't get nearly as celebrated as the mid-early 90s Cowboys do. Like, every time I turn on my fucking television, I have to hear about the early 90s Cowboys and how great they were. Yes, they were great. We get it. That was nearly 30 years ago. It's 30 years ago. I mean, Jesus Christ. They still get to talk Troy Aikman and Michael Irvin and Emmitt Smith. Oh, God. Guess what? What about now? What about the last 3 decades? Who cares? Fuck you. Seriously. Like, I'm sick and fucking tired of hearing about the triplets. I'm sick and fucking tired of hearing about Jimmy Johnson being forced out. I'm sick and fucking tired of hearing about how the Cowboys should have won like 5 or 6 Super Bowls in the 90s. No, you shouldn't have. You won as much. You probably won more than you should have won. Okay? Because you were able to stack talent because there wasn't any free agency until like, 93, 94? I mean, come on now. Again, you guys, the early 90s Cowboys were basically a much more glorified version of the 80s and 90s Redskins. That's it. And some of you may say, well, that's not a very good burn, Barry. Well, guess what? I'm trying to be different. I'm trying to think outside the box here, outside from the normal 50 other things that I could easily say about the Cowboys that show that they're dog shit. So forgive me if my reasoning or what I'm saying doesn't seem to be hitting, but I'm trying trying because I'm trying to not be lazy, which is what the Cowboys have been for the last 30 years. Denver Broncos. Again, there's certain franchises where the easy target is a particular player or a coach or an owner. And in this case, the easy target for the Broncos is John Elway, because to this day, there's still so much discussion, so many agendas and narratives about, was John Elway overrated? Because you look at his numbers in the first 10 years of his career, you say to yourself, this guy was just Kerry Collins with big teeth. I mean, my goodness, his numbers were kind of dog shit, and he got to the Super Bowl 3 times. No, he carried those teams to the Super Bowl. Meanwhile, he had like the first ranked defense, and his numbers were pretty mediocre. It wasn't like the guy was out there throwing, Dan Marino numbers, who was in his own draft class, by the way. So people were like, it was a different era, you stupid son of a bitch. Get away from John Elway. It's like, no, okay? John Elway was throwing like 18 touchdowns and 18 interceptions and rushing for like 3 touchdowns. And his team, because the AFC was so bad in the mid to late 80s, that he was able to get to 3 Super Bowls. And it would be one thing if, and I understand, like, I don't blame him for losing in those Super Bowls, but he was dog shit in all those Super Bowls. His teams got destroyed in all those Super Bowls, which again, I don't really blame him for losing, but why is that an argument for why he's the GOAT? Like, what? Elway is the only quarterback I've ever seen in all these GOAT discussions that even now gets bonus points for his traits. Like, oh, he was the most gifted prospect ever. Okay, well, who fucking cares? Does that mean Andrew Luck's a top 5 quarterback of all time because he was like one of the 2 or 3 best quarterback prospects ever? No. And Andrew Luck was another guy that, like, yeah, he may have been better than his stats, but his stats still, weren't particularly great or dominant. At least Andrew Luck had some good seasons. Same way with Elway at the end of his career. But it was like, this guy, people talk about, especially the old heads talk about Elway. Oh, you had to see him play. He was like the best quarterback ever. And you look at his numbers and it's like, I'm sorry, at a certain point, production matters. And they say, oh, well, the first decade of his career, he was in an antiquated system. What other quarterback do you know gets a decade-long pass for shit numbers or for mediocre numbers that also is in the GOAT debates? Like, I mean, I swear to God, like I say, you can criticize Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, and Peyton Manning, and you can come and Joe Montana. You can literally criticize any of the quarterback. The one thing they all have, though, is their stats are pretty fucking good. Elway, you look at his numbers, you're like, oh geez, okay. But then it's kind of like, what else is there to say about the Broncos? Because then it's like Elway was there, and then he retired, and then you were just floating in the middle. You're mediocre, and then Peyton went there for 4 years. You guys won another Super Bowl in spite of Peyton at the end. But then for the last 8 or 9 years, you guys have just been dog shit. You haven't made the playoffs since 2015, since you won the Super Bowl. Really, I mean, in a way, it's kind of like the Bulls after The Last Dance, where they broke up the party. They won, they beat Utah, they broke everything up, and then they didn't make the playoffs again for like another 8 years. That's what the Broncos are, except they didn't win 6 championships, And also, when you guys were winning with Elway, like, it took John Elway having like a Hall of Fame running back, or at the very least, even if you disagree that Terrell Davis is a Hall of Famer, at the very least, in those seasons, he was the best running back in the league, or an elite running back. He had a Hall of Fame tight end in Shannon Sharp. He had very good defenses. He had Hall of Fame offensive linemen. He had a great scheme around him. He had a West Coast offense. He had a coach who probably will be in the Hall of Fame soon. He had basically the most ideal situation imaginable at the end of his career, John Elway did. And Pat Bowlen, the owner, was cheating the salary cap blatantly. That's why those teams were so good. So John Elway had to cheat in order to win his 2 Super Bowls. And even then, even surrounded in about as perfect of a situation as a quarterback could possibly be in, Elway's numbers were still merely just very good. He was never a dominant quarterback. And he still gets thrown in these GOAT debates. It just blows my fucking mind. I'm sorry. I had to get that off my chest. Detroit Lions. Now, this is an interesting one because the Lions, for so many years, it was, oh, the poor Lions, and oh my goodness, how can you make fun of the Lions? The only thing they have is Barry Sanders and Calvin Johnson, and that's the only thing. Look, props to you if you're on YouTube and you're old enough to remember the 1957 NFL championship. I think that's the last time, what was that? The last time the Lions won a championship, and then Bobby Lane cursed the team. So if you're if you're 80 years old listening to this, I thank you, and you're exempt, because other than that, most Lions fans have just been exempt to dog shit, except for the last 2 years. And, the one thing, and I talked about how Barry Sanders was extremely fun to watch, and he was obviously a great player, but he was a quitter. Barry Sanders was a quitter, and he wasn't a very good playoff running back, which is always funny to me that people hold, and I understand, obviously, the quarterbacks are much more valuable than running backs or any other position, really, which is why the choker talk gets more talked about quarterbacks than any other position. But still, Barry Sanders was not a good playoff running back. He had a game where he ran for negative yards in a game the Lions lost by 4. Barry Sanders ran for negative yards in a playoff game. He didn't win. He made one conference championship game that he got blown out in. Okay, Barry Sanders is probably the most glorified loser this side of Ken Griffey Jr. that sports has. Okay, Calvin Johnson, freak, great receiver, didn't win anything. Never even won at least Barry Sanders won a playoff game. Calvin Johnson didn't even win a playoff game. People say, oh, well, he's a receiver. How do you know, that's what being a receiver, that's what being a great receiver has its benefits, because you do all these great things, you make all these amazing catches, and then your team still doesn't win shit. And then people turn around and say, oh, he's the best, he's the GOAT, he's the Hall of Famer. And then your team doesn't win anything, and people say, oh, well, he's just a wide receiver. You expect him to win games? I mean, I don't expect them to be as valuable as a quarterback, but yeah, I would expect a guy, if he's that impactful, to maybe have a little bit more impact on the win column. Yeah, the Lions went 0-16 with him one year. I mean, he couldn't get them at least one win? Really? Come on, Calvin. And now, plus he's producing marijuana now in retirement. That's just, come on, that's disgusting. That's unforgivable. But the real thing is that here's something that a lot of people, I haven't seen talked about a lot, and I haven't seen it brought up a lot, because everybody loves Dan Campbell. The media has a boner for Dan Campbell, and the Lions are this cute, little engine that could team. The Lions should have been in the Super Bowl. The Lions should have been in the Super Bowl last year, and they choked big time. They had one of the biggest choke jobs in the NFC Championship game versus the 49ers last year, okay? They were winning by 17 points at halftime. They were winning by 17 and they lost. And it just was kind of brushed aside because, Dan Campbell, he's this fiery coach and we love Dan Campbell. Oh, I'd run through a wall for Dan Campbell. Well, Dan Campbell calls these 4th down passes and they don't work. A couple times they don't work. But to me, any other franchise that blows a 17-point lead at halftime in a championship game, okay, would usually get endlessly shit on for it. But with the Lions, it's kind of like, well, they're the Lions, so we're going to give them the kid gloves. And he did a great job getting there anyway. Guess what? You're not guaranteed to get back to the conference championship again. Even though the Lions this year have a pretty good record and they might get the 1 seed, that doesn't mean they're going to get to the conference championship game again. That means they never even may get close to a Super Bowl again. So that's one thing. That's the thing. If you're a Lions fan, you should be fucking angry and upset that you didn't go to the Super Bowl last year and even win it, because Jared Goff has actually had some success against Patrick Mahomes. So the Lions choked last year in the conference championship game and they get zero shit for it. But guess what? I'm giving them shit right now.